Greetings world. We are anonymous.
Greetings world. We are anonymous. Welcome to this week's edition of Weekly News, bringing you the weekly top stories that have been filtered through the mainstream media. I'm Evie Hammond. In news from Standing Rock, we recently reported on a DAPL worker named Kyle Thompson who, armed with an AR-15, attempted to infiltrate the Standing Rock main camp on October 27. Thompson was arrested by Bureau of Indian Affairs officers after being pursued on foot, and was handed over to the FBI, who in turn handed him over to Morton County. Morton County released Thompson with no charges, and as unbelievable as that action was, now Morton County has put out an arrest warrant for the man who disarmed him. Brennan Nastasio, the native land protector that can be seen trying to talk Thompson down in the video footage caught by natives, is now being charged with quote-unquote, felony terrorizing, due to the late October incident. Natives are calling on Morton County to drop their charges. For more, we go to Democracy Now!
At Standing Rock in North Dakota, water protectors fighting the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline are calling on Morton County to drop an arrest warrant issued for Brennan Nastasio, the Pueblo water protector who disarmed a Dakota Access security contractor attempting to infiltrate the resistance camps on October 27th. A video shows Nastasio convincing pipeline security contractor Kyle Thompson to stop pointing his AR-15 rifle at the Native Americans and then hand over his 30-round clip. Thompson was later arrested by Bureau of Indian Affairs police, but Morton County went on to release Thompson without charges and instead issue an arrest warrant for the water protector Nastasio on charges of felony terrorizing. Nastasio has also been placed on Morton County's most wanted list. This is Pueblo water protector Brennan Nastasio.
To be on Morton County's most wanted list sends me a message that Morton County doesn't care about the people at camp. They would have rather let Kyle Thompson come in and shoot everybody at camp than for me to disarm him. I hope that ain't the case, Morton County. And I hope they realize that I saved lives that day and dropped this arrest warrant that they have out for me. You know, I approached Kyle Thompson to disarm him because I was concerned about the safety of the camp.
The Department of Justice has refused to provide Morton County with additional law enforcement agents, citing their belief that it would escalate tensions between law enforcement and land protectors, rather than easing it. Morton County Sheriff Kyle Kirschmayer and other North Dakota law enforcement officials are now calling directly on Obama to send reinforcements, as well as additional money. The state has already provided $17 million to assist Morton County in their human and civil rights violations, and Kirschmayer has expressed a growing fear of quote-unquote, vigilante justice, according to WFMJ of Ohio. The city of Seattle is working to sever its relationship with Wells Fargo, who currently manages the city's $3 billion budget, over the bank's involvement with the DAPL project. The Seattle City Council introduced legislation that will allow the city's current contract with Wells Fargo to expire at the end of 2017, and will not be renewed. In the meantime, the city will refrain from conducting further banking, investment, or other business with the bank, at the city's discretion. Wells Fargo has not only been targeted due to the fact it is the most visible of U.S. banks financing the pipeline, with close to $500 million loaned for its construction, but also because of the scandal earlier this year in which over 2 million unauthorized accounts were opened in the names of customers. Other cities and states, including Minneapolis and California, are also exploring ways to end their business with financial institutions who invest in the fossil fuel industry and projects such as the Dakota Access Pipeline. The CIA has announced their conclusion, based on no evidence, that Russia interfered with the U.S. election. Trump's transition team has denied the accusation, while at the same time telling citizens it's time to move on. It is being claimed that the Podesta files came from Russian hackers as well, which Julian Assange had already denied when Hillary Clinton made the same accusation, stating quote, "The Clinton camp has been able to project a neo-McCarthyist hysteria that Russia is responsible for everything." Hillary Clinton has stated multiple times, falsely, that 17 U.S. intelligence agencies had assessed that Russia was the source of our publications. That's false. We can say that the Russian government is not the source, unquote. To back Assange's statement, at least in part, the FBI and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or ODNI, refused to accept the CIA's conclusions as well, citing a lack of conclusive evidence on the intelligence agency's part. Both Democrats and Republicans are now calling for a full investigation. We'd like to remind our viewers that the CIA has a long history of being a bunch of fucking liars. Their role is literally to lie for the government. In fact, you can pretty much guarantee that if they're involved in a situation, it is most likely to undertake or cover up a deception. For more on this, we take you to Noam Chomsky.
This concentration on CIA atrocities is one of the techniques that's used to avoid criticism of the government of real power. If you can blame something on the CIA, this kind of rogue outfit, then you do exactly what the government wants you to do. The CIA is there for what's called plausible deniability. It's the phrase that's used inside. So if the government wants to say, overthrow the Indonesian, if Washington wants to overthrow the government of Indonesia, you say, okay, the CIA did it. And then you can say, well, we don't have anything to do with it. That's just that rogue outfit if something goes wrong. The CIA is an agency of the executive branch of the government. They do what the executive branch of the government tells them to do. There's a long record, rich record, and there are some exceptions, but overwhelmingly, the CIA is just an agency of the executive which acts in ways to provide plausible deniability, to sort of keep us clean if something goes wrong. Then you blame them if something goes wrong. And that's true on case after case. So, yeah, when you talk about the CIA, you should think of that as a metaphor. It's a way of describing what the executive branch of the government is doing and the corporate backers of the executive branch, and they've got this agency which carries out the ugly stuff for them.
Finally, former British ambassador to Uzbekistan and current associate of Julian Assange, Craig Murray, has disclosed to the British newspaper, the Daily Mail, that the Clinton emails were not hacked, but leaked. Murray states that he himself flew to Washington, D.C. to obtain the Clinton emails, not from a Russian insider, but from a disgruntled Bernie Sanders supporter and whistleblower within the U.S. political system who had legal access to the information. Murray states that the clandestine handoff took place in a wooded area near American University, and that the leaker's motivation was, quote, disgust at the corruption of the Clinton Foundation and the tilting of the primary election playing field against Bernie Sanders, unquote. Unlike the CIA's flimsy accusation against Russia, which is based only on an anonymous source that provides no proof at all, we now have an actual former British ambassador providing testimony that counters the CIA's version of events. Murray goes on to state, quote, I don't understand why the CIA would say the information came from Russian hackers when they must know that isn't true. Regardless of whether the Russians hacked into the DNC, the documents WikiLeaks published did not come from that, unquote. In related news, Trump's new pick for Secretary of State, ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, has had ties to the Russian government for years while handling ExxonMobil's Russian account. In 2011, Exxon created a partnership with Russia to tap into their, quote, notoriously elusive oil reserves, unquote. The signing of the partnership took place in a ceremony that was attended by Vladimir Putin himself, after which Putin awarded Tillerson with an Order of Friendship, which is considered one of the highest honors that can be bestowed upon a foreigner. The partnership between ExxonMobil and Russia has been prevented from reaching full fruition, due to the sanctions placed on Russia by the US after Putin's intervention in Ukraine. The sanctions are almost sure to be lifted under a Trump administration. In a report from Alec Heidel, 73-year-old Francisco Serna of Bakersfield, California was shot and killed by police while holding a crucifix. Serna suffered from the early onset of dementia, and slipped out of his house when his wife briefly left the room to check on the laundry. She reportedly heard the shots fired outside before she had a chance to figure out where her husband was, and ran out to find police standing over his body, according to the Inquisitor. Police were called by a neighbor who informed officers of Serna's condition, and claimed he had a gun. Within 20 seconds of taking the neighbor's report, Officer Reagan Selman, an ex-Marine and rookie cop who's been on the streets for less than a year, shot and killed the elderly man, despite previous knowledge of his dementia. It was confirmed after his death that he was unarmed, and was in fact holding a wooden crucifix that, according to his wife, he often carried as a form of security due to his fear of dying. Selman has been placed on administrative leave during the investigation, however Heidel states that information obtained so far indicates police will most likely whitewash the incident, as usual. White supremacist and domestic terrorist, Dylan Roof, who attacked an African-American church in Charleston, South Carolina on June 17, 2015, has been convicted on all 9 counts of murder, and will face a death penalty trial next month. Roof reportedly chose the Mother Emanuel AME Church due to its historical significance within the black community, and had intended to start a race war. South Carolina Governor, Nikki Haley, stated, quote, it is my hope that the survivors, the families, and the people of South Carolina can find some peace in the fact that justice has been served, unquote. In world news this week, nearly 700 institutions around the world, as well as 58,000 individuals across 76 countries, have all committed to divesting from the fossil fuel industry. The total amount being committed to divestment is now $5.2 trillion, double that of last year. UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, stated, quote, it's clear the transition to a clean energy future is inevitable, beneficial, and well underway, and that investors have a key role to play, unquote. According to The Guardian, the fossil fuel divestment campaign began on university campuses in 2011, and included among the institutions who have pledged to divest from fossil fuels, is Trinity College Dublin, the University of Dublin, who will pull its €6.1 million investment from the industry. In news from Turkey, it was reported by The Globalist that the twin bombs in central Istanbul may not have been targeting citizens, but rather police officers, which calls to question President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's efforts to, quote, capitalize on the attacks by asserting that they had been aimed to maximize casualties, irrespective of their identity, unquote. A splinter of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, known as the Kurdistan Freedom Falcons, has claimed responsibility for the attack, which claimed 38 people in total, 30 of which were police officers. Erdogan's position on the matter reportedly serves two purposes: to group together all forms of political violence in an effort to smooth over the fact he has suppressed Kurdish political and cultural rights, including his derailment of peace talks in June of 2015 following the death of 3 Kurdish police officers, and to shift the majority of the blame to the PKK, even though the Turkish government is equally to blame for the collapse of the peace talks. Both Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International are reporting that France's renewal of emergency powers threaten human rights. The new law that was passed on December 15 prolongs the country's state of emergency for an additional 7 months. According to Amnesty, this normalizes exceptional measures, while at the same time weakening human rights and the rule of law. In a statement from the director of the Terrorism and Counterterrorism Program at Human Rights Watch, Nadim Aouri, quote, with each renewal, the state of emergency slowly becomes the new norm, which is dangerous for a democracy based on rule of law, unquote. According to international law, governments can temporarily restrict certain rights during states of emergency, including freedom of movement, expression, and association. Emergency powers are not to be applied in a discriminatory manner, or to stigmatize people of a particular ethnicity, religion, or social group, but let's be realistic, governments do whatever the fuck they want, which is the only reason we're covering this topic in the first place. Colombian President, Juan Manuel Santos, has just accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway, for his efforts on ending the half-century-long civil war that has claimed 220,000 lives, and displaced 8 million. Santos took the opportunity during his acceptance speech to call for a strategy shift in the US-promoted war on drugs, which he states has produced enormous violence and environmental damage. Santos has called for a global focus on easing prohibition laws on the consumption of illegal narcotics. Although many Americans would welcome such sentiments, Colombians are still divided over the peace deal, and news of Santos' Nobel Peace Prize was met with subdued reactions. In news on Syria, information is now surfacing that everything Americans are being told by the mainstream media are lies. In a report from Vandita, at a recent conference hosted by the Schiller Institute, Syria's ambassador to the UN, Dr. Bashir al-Yaafari, called out Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the US for their role in training terrorists in Syria. For more, we go to independent Canadian journalist, Eva Bartlett, at a recent press conference at the United Nations.
Thanks very much. I'd like to touch on something that Sarah Flounders mentioned, which is that today in the General Assembly, the representative of my country, Canada, is raising or has raised a resolution which is not about human rights. It's not about the people of Syria. It's a resolution meant to point fingers and to vilify the governments of Syria and Russia. And this resolution relates to a UN Security Council resolution that was vetoed by Russia and China some days ago. That resolution pertained to another useless ceasefire in Syria, which would have no bearing on, bring no good to the people of Syria, and which follows a week of liberation of areas of Aleppo, which now amounts to about 95% of areas of Aleppo that have been occupied for years by terrorist factions. So at this time, when 100,000 civilians in these areas occupied for years by terrorist factions have been liberated, the UN, parties in the UN wanted to impose another ceasefire. And I want to remind people why these ceasefires are indeed pointless. The last ceasefire in September was from the very start negated by 20 main terrorist factions who declared they were not going to participate, and from the very beginning violated the ceasefire over 300 times during the duration of the ceasefire. And not only these terrorist factions, while the Syrians and while the Russians adhered to the tenets of the ceasefire, but the American-led coalition itself violated the ceasefire by targeting Syrian army positions in Deir ez-Zor, killing at least 83 Syrian soldiers in a prolonged attack that lasted nearly 1 hour and which enabled ISIS to overtake that position. So this is one reason why a ceasefire is pointless at this point in time. There is no faith that any of the parties that the US and Western leaders who have funded these terrorists, there's no faith that they can actually control the terrorists and get them to adhere to a ceasefire. And the people of Aleppo want Aleppo to be completely freed. And I speak having been to Aleppo 4 times, and this is the will of people in Aleppo. Wherever I've gone, I've spoken in Arabic to the people I'm speaking with. What Donna, what Sarah have said, that the people support their army and government is absolutely true. Whatever you hear in the corporate media is the complete opposite. And on that note, what you hear in the corporate media, and I will name them, BBC, Guardian, New York Times, etc., on Aleppo is also opposite of reality.
According to UNICEF, malnutrition has reached a critical unprecedented level in Yemen, with at least 462,000 children suffering from acute malnutrition, and another 2.2 million requiring urgent care. Democracy Now! Has reported that at least one child dies every 10 minutes on average in the war-torn country as its health system is on the verge of collapse, and much of the damage is being caused by the US-backed Saudi bombings which began in March of 2015. Last year alone, the US approved more than $20 billion in military sales to the Saudis, and US munitions have been repeatedly found at the scene of strikes that have killed civilians. And finally, in anonymous news, the US government is getting theirs this week, for their role in funding the drug war in the Philippines that has claimed the lives of thousands, including children. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte recently affirmed that as mayor of Davao City, he murdered 3 people. Duterte stated, quote, "I used to do it personally, just to show to the guys that if I can do it, why can't you?" He continued, "I'd go around in Davao with a motorcycle, with a big bike around, and I would just patrol the streets looking for trouble. I was really looking for confrontation, so I could kill," unquote. The Philippines is obviously being run by a sociopath. Also under attack is the Myanmar government, for the genocide that is occurring among the Rohingya minority. The UN has reportedly been receiving daily reports of rapes and killings, and independent monitors are being barred from investigating. UN Human Rights Chief, Eid Ra'ad al-Hussein, stated that the government has taken a quote-unquote, short-sighted, counterproductive, even callous approach to the crisis, which risks dire, long-term repercussion for the region. And that concludes this episode of Ta Weekly News, bringing you the weekly top stories that have been filtered through the mainstream media. Be sure to join us next week for our final episode. To view transcripts and full lists of sources, please visit www.anonhq.com. We are anonymous. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Greetings world. We are anonymous.
Greetings world. We are anonymous. Welcome to this week's edition of Ta Weekly News, bringing you the weekly top stories that have been filtered through the mainstream media. I'm Evie Hammond. In news from Standing Rock, we recently reported on a DAPL worker named Kyle Thompson who, armed with an AR-15, attempted to infiltrate the Standing Rock main camp on October 27. Thompson was arrested by Bureau of Indian Affairs officers after being pursued on foot, and was handed over to the FBI, who in turn handed him over to Morton County. Morton County released Thompson with no charges, and as unbelievable as that action was, now Morton County has put out an arrest warrant for the man who disarmed him. Brennan Nastasio, the native land protector that can be seen trying to talk Thompson down in the video footage caught by natives, is now being charged with quote-unquote, felony terrorizing, due to the late October incident. Natives are calling on Morton County to drop their charges. For more, we go to Democracy Now!
At Standing Rock in North Dakota, water protectors fighting the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline are calling on Morton County to drop an arrest warrant issued for Brennan Nastasio, the Pueblo water protector who disarmed a Dakota Access security contractor attempting to infiltrate the resistance camps on October 27th. A video shows Nastasio convincing pipeline security contractor Kyle Thompson to stop pointing his AR-15 rifle at the Native Americans and then hand over his 30-round clip. Thompson was later arrested by Bureau of Indian Affairs police, but Morton County went on to release Thompson without charges and instead issue an arrest warrant for the water protector Nastasio on charges of felony terrorizing. Nastasio has also been placed on Morton County's most wanted list. This is Pueblo water protector Brennan Nastasio.
To be on Morton County's most wanted list sends me a message that Morton County doesn't care about the people at camp. They would have rather let Kyle Thompson come in and shoot everybody at camp than for me to disarm him. I hope that ain't the case, Morton County. I hope they realize that I saved lives that day and dropped this arrest warrant that they have out for me. I approached Kyle Thompson to disarm him